The National Desk, America's News Now.
More hostages released as the truce hangs in the balance. Is an American amongst the latest group?
I implore every person, every community, every institution to stand with Jewish Americans, not to ignore it, not to shrug your shoulders, to denounce anti-Semitism in all its forms.
Hate in the United States is on the rise. What can be done to lower the temperature? And then a look inside the impact of the UAW strikes, what it means to the automakers, and what it might cost you for your next vehicle purchase. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. As we come on the air, one American hostage has been freed after Hamas just released 12 more hostages. This as a truce between Israel and Hamas is set to expire tonight. Right now, negotiations underway for another two-day extension as key mediator Qatar says things are trending in the right direction.
It is happening in a positive environment, and it fills us with hope that we will be able to announce something positive by the end of the day.
As for that American hostage, unclear their identity, but we do know it is an American-Israeli dual citizen, marking the second American to be freed out of about 8 or 9 thought to be held in Gaza. Hamas has released nearly 100 hostages, and by the end of the night, Israel will have freed over 200 Palestinians from Israeli jails. Meantime, tonight, Secretary of State Antony Blinken on his way to Israel for his third Middle East trip since the conflict began. The secretary says his focus will be pushing a longer-term extension to the pause in fighting. Blinken also expected to travel to the Palestinian West Bank. Blinken's visit to the West Bank happening when tensions over violence are at an all-time high. Today, the Palestinian Ministry of Health reporting an 8-year-old child amongst 2 minors killed by Israeli forces in the city of Jenin. The shooting of that 8-year-old caught on camera, and I do want to warn you, this video is disturbing. Adam Al-Ghul shot dead during an IDF raid to search and detain those Israel accuses of terrorist activities. When asked to comment, Israel said a number of suspects hurled explosive devices their way, and they were returning fire, though that's not captured here in this video. The Palestinian Health Ministry says more than 240 Palestinians have been killed by either troops or Israeli civilians, with more than 2,000 Palestinians detained since October 7th. Meantime, here at home, concerns over rising animosity towards Arabs, Muslims, and Jewish communities. Just today, a new survey out that's really taking the temperature of what it's like at some of our campuses across the country. A survey done by Jewish advocacy groups showed 73% of Jewish college students have experienced anti-Semitism since the start of the school year. This as the U.S. Department of Education opens an investigation into Harvard University over claims it failed to respond to alleged incidents of anti-Semitic harassment. That's on top of the 6 universities the agency announced it would investigate earlier this month amidst concerning anti-Jewish and anti-Muslim reports in a climate fueled by the politically charged war happening abroad. As a Jewish American himself, today Senator Chuck Schumer delivering an address condemning the ethnic intimidation.
And I have noticed a significant disparity between how Jewish people regard the rise of anti-Semitism and how many of my non-Jewish friends regard it. To us, the Jewish people, the rise of anti-Semitism is a crisis, a 5-alarm fire that must be extinguished.
At least one U.S. service member has died in an Osprey crash off Japan's southern coast very early this morning. The military helicopter had 8 passengers and 6 service members are believed to have been on board at the time of the crash. Search and rescue operations, they are continuing at this hour. There have been a number of Osprey crashes over the years, giving the aircraft the nickname Widowmaker. Since 1992, the Osprey has had at least 15 other crashes with damage beyond repair and over 50 reported deaths, not including what happened today. Investigations are ongoing to find out what happened when a large fire at an auto body shop in Hillsboro, Ohio, claimed the lives of 3 workers and sent a 4th to the hospital yesterday afternoon. Hillsboro is a town of just 6,500 people. The National Desk's David Winter takes us through the toll of this tragedy.
This explosion caught on a surveillance camera from across the street. It would be followed by a huge fireball and plumes of smoke shooting into the sky, and then witnesses describe a couple of more explosions. The concussion of the blast shook homes several blocks away. Local emergency crews were on scene within minutes, but it appears their efforts were too late for 3 of the people inside. As you mentioned, 1 person was injured and transported to the hospital, reportedly in fair condition right now. For those who have lived here for decades, this came as a total shock.
I don't know, it was unreal. And as soon as I got out to the front to see what was going on, the smoke and the flames were, way up in the air. So I just can't understand what would be in there to make it blow up like that. Well, I can see a fire, but might be some acetylene torches in something in a garage. But to make that much of an explosion, well, you've seen it. You've been there. You know what it looks like. So I don't know. It's just a shame that there was, some lives lost. I hate that.
Yeah, we'll take a look at some of the aerials that we took from Skyview 12. Really shows the devastation of the explosion and the ensuing fire. A lot of questions still remaining here. What caused this? Who are the victims? Right now, police and fire officials appear to be more concerned with gathering evidence and trying to figure out what happened as opposed to satisfying the public's curiosity, which is understandable.
Well, 2 Colorado paramedics are going on trial today for their alleged role in the 2019 death of Elijah McClain. The 23-year-old black man died after police detained him and medics injected him with a powerful sedative. The medics pleaded not guilty to manslaughter, assault, and other charges. Prosecutors claim the medics injected him with too large a dose of ketamine. This trial is the final of 3 surrounding McClain's death. 1 police officer was found guilty of criminally negligent homicide. 2 others were acquitted. Hawaii's Attorney General has issued subpoenas to 3 Maui agencies to finish up the fact-finding part of the investigation into the August wildfires. The Maui Emergency Management Agency, County of Maui Department of Public Works, and County of Maui Department of Water Supply received the subpoenas. The agencies have been criticized for their response to the wildfires that killed at least 97 people. And the Supreme Court, it heard a case today that would curb the power of federal agencies. A lawsuit takes on the Securities and Exchange Commission's use of in-house proceedings to enforce securities law, including prohibiting insider trading. Critics say it is near impossible to win legal challenges against the commission. Billionaires Elon Musk and Mark Cuban, among others, have supported the challenge. The SEC case is one of 3 on the High Court's docket this session, involving conservative groups and businesses challenging the administrative state. From Italy to the Netherlands, Brazil to Argentina, there is a notable rise on the far right. We're talking about political candidates and parties that embrace populism and nationalism, even though critics call them extremists. Why is it happening, and how does it play into America's race for the White House? Chief Political Correspondent Scott Thuman has more.
Vowing to fix a slumping economy and make Argentina great again, Javier Milei won over disgruntled voters and went from TV commentator to president-elect.
Ben ik te verstaan? Ja!
And in the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, fiercely anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, tough border messaging, positioned himself to become the next Dutch prime minister. So is the rise of the far right catching fire?
I think his electoral victory is a massive game changer.
The pushback against poor economics and mass migration has become a hallmark to populist candidates and may be gaining steam, even if the candidates are labeled extreme or even dangerous.
USA! USA!
The comparisons to American politics hard to miss.
And I think what happened with Trump was the world was watching and thought, if America, right, this bastion of democracy and freedom, isn't going to tamp down on this guy. Well, who is?
That Trump parallel, something we asked the Dutch populist Geert Wilders about 6 years ago when his stock really began to rise.
People have called you the Dutch Donald Trump. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm the Dutch Geert Wilders. I'm no Donald Trump, but there might be similarities between the movement.
Trump hoping that same sentiment puts him back in the White House, and it seems to be working at the moment. Trump with an eye-popping 50-point lead over his closest Republican rivals.
And back overseas in France, the far-right party there, often headlined by the controversial Marine Le Pen, is right now outpolling by large margins the current President Macron's party, leading into next year's elections there. Amira?
Scott, we know that far-right policies seem to gain ground in ebbs and flows around the world, but do these politicians have a track record of success?
Well, this isn't something terribly new when you look back just over the past 6, 7, 8 years, and I've covered that personally, whether it be in Brazil or Germany or the Netherlands, as we just pointed out. We're seeing a lot of similarities, not just with the talk, but also with the candidates and the campaigns, and that does translate a lot into what we're seeing here in the United States leading into 2024.
All right, Scott Thuman live in Washington, D.C. for us. Thank you as always. Coming up here, Homeland Security Secretary was busy at the border today, but he isn't safe from Congress just yet. The latest on the GOP's plans for him. And the U.S. economy may be looking up for some, but how long could your family last if tragedy hit and you relied on savings alone? The not-so-good numbers just ahead. Plus, an elementary school counselor becomes a hero in the lunchroom. The amazing story that saved a life. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, he was at the southern border today, receiving an update on the challenges faced by Border Patrol agents there. Also today, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene reintroduced articles of impeachment against him. It all comes as border policy remains central to an aid package for Ukraine and Israel. Here's Christine Frizzell with the latest.
As temperatures turn to freezing, Chicago is moving forward with its plan to build a winterized base camp to temporarily house up to 2,000 migrants. The reality in New York City has strained resources, adding fuel to the fire of criticism from Republicans on Capitol Hill, blaming the Biden administration's policies for incentivizing millions to come to the United States.
This is a national security crisis.
Some have even threatened to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, as others sound alarm bells about criminals and drugs getting into the country, including 118 pounds of fentanyl seized on Thanksgiving Day alone. ICE officials sharing this video from last week of migrants being sent back to their home countries, but critics say the majority are allowed to stay here as they await processing for their asylum claims, which can take months and often years. One reason Republicans in the Senate say they have tied changes in immigration policy to an aid package for Israel and Ukraine.
The American people are simply saying, look, you're asking for about $109 billion for defense purposes, but why aren't you fixing the policies at the southern border where you've had 8.4 million encounters in just, well, since Biden took office?
Many Democrats say they support more funding for border security. Some even signaling they'd be open to bigger changes to asylum policy and even bringing back the Remain in Mexico policy.
You can always work with the UN High Commission of Refugees. They can be involved. They can provide the security while we process them. So, yeah, we can have a safe stay in Mexico process.
The border security component of this aid package for Israel and Ukraine is supported by many moderates, but progressives say it goes way too far, and conservatives say it doesn't go nearly far enough. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Christine, thank you. The U.S. economy got a positive revision today. The Commerce Department released updated figures for the third quarter, showing the economy grew at a faster pace than previously reported. Between July and September, they show the U.S. economy actually grew at 5.2%, a little better than the 4.9% first reported, helped by stronger than expected consumer spending. Meanwhile, the share of U.S. adults who say they can cover 6 months of expenses using their savings has dropped from last year. According to new polling from Morning Consult, it's down to only 16.5%. In addition, the share of adults who don't know how long they can live off their savings, that increased to 21%, up from 15.5% in July of last year. Bank of America has to pay out a $12 million fine for mortgage disclosure violations. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says BOA reported false mortgage lending data to the federal government. According to the agency, Bank of America did not accurately report demographic data about mortgage applications to regulators. That information can be used to potentially expose discriminatory lending practices. Bank of America did not admit or deny anything in the order. And we are getting a picture of what the United Auto Workers stand-up strike did to automakers. General Motors announcing today that the 6-week strike cost them $1.1 billion. The company also said they lost production of 95,000 vehicles because of that walkout. GM indicated that due to the strike and new contracts, cost per vehicle will increase $500 next year, up to $575 within 4 years. And take a look at this. This is the motorcade for Rosalind Carter's funeral service held this morning. The former First Lady was laid to rest in Plains, Georgia, at the very home she and her husband, former President Jimmy Carter, have shared since the 1960s. The former president is 99 years old and receiving hospice care himself, and when the time comes, is expected to be buried alongside her. Rosalind Carter was 96 years old. Pope Francis made his weekly audience at the Vatican today, but did not deliver his prepared speech. He said he was not well and his voice was not pretty. Yesterday, his doctors forced him to cancel his scheduled visit to Dubai for a UN climate conference. Pope Francis turns 87 next month, and he's currently being treated for lung inflammation. American life expectancy, it is up, but still lower than pre-pandemic levels. That's according to the latest data out of the CDC. The agency says in 2022, the life expectancy in the U.S. was 77 and a half years old. But the U.S. lost about 2.4 years of life in the first 2 years of the pandemic. And the life expectancy is still lower than it has been in about 20 years. But the CDC also said more people in the U.S. are dying from suicide. More people, in fact, died by suicide in 2022 than any other year on record. The CDC says that dates back to at least 1941. Agency data shows at least 49,000 people died from intentional self-harm last year. That's more than 14 deaths for every 100,000 people. A separate CDC analysis through the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Solutions shows more than half of suicides involve guns. And during this busy holiday season, cardiologists say don't forget to take care of your own heart. Medical reporter Liz Bonis shares several steps you can take to keep your heart beating strong.
Hey there, if you've been diagnosed with a heart rhythm problem, in addition to medication or the therapies that your doctor recommends, this new report says lifestyle habits can also play a big role in keeping you well.
They can also help keep you from having a heart event if you do have atrial fibrillation.
Atrial fibrillation is when normally the top part of your heart squeezes and the bottom part of your heart squeezes. When you get atrial fibrillation, the top part of your heart just kind of goes like this.
Dr. Tim Henry of Ohio's Christ Hospital Heart and Vascular Center says that can trigger kind of a mess up of the regular heart rhythm. Dr. Henry told me it can trigger serious symptoms.
You have an increased chance of getting blood clots in your heart. You have to be on blood thinners.
So instead, he says, after clearing it with your own cardiologist, try a few of the lifestyle changes recommended by the American Heart Association to keep your heart beating strong. They include cutting back on caffeine, limiting alcohol intake, making your diet heavy on fruits and vegetables, controlling your weight, exercising regularly, sleeping more, and smoking less.
Now, they do add up, so even if you can't do all of these at one time, start with one. I'm medical reporter Liz Bonis. Back to you.
We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We are taking the pulse of America.
As of October 31st, November 1st, that number had dropped to 3,200.
OBN says several of the illegal operations were using Oklahoma as a base of operations for black market drug trafficking.
Many of which were straw owners facilitating fraudulent paperwork to get licensed in Oklahoma, and also the black market growers that were using those licenses to facilitate their black market drug trafficking all over the United States.
Many of the marijuana farms were linked to transnational criminal groups from Mexico, China, Armenia, Russia, and other countries.
It has become a huge issue in reference to national security because you have communistic and terroristic countries that are here in Oklahoma, and they're moving this product on the black market and sending and laundering money, millions and billions of dollars, back to these countries.
Never know what's going to happen when you're working with kids in a school, and just happen to be in the right place at the right time.
What was expected to be a normal lunch hour turned upside down. He says that school principal John Jordan was out of town that day, and Irvin was covering lunch duty.
We're just going through the motions, having a normal lunch, cleaning off some tables, and
that's when he says trouble hit. A number of students informed Mr. Irvin, or who they called Mr. Nick, that one of their peers was choking. Irvin quickly stepped in and gave the fifth grader the Heimlich maneuver, saving her from disaster.
Most of the time, what we do is we kind of just be heroes in our own little way, and we kind of keep that to ourselves, and we just, come to work every day and want to help kids and help families and not take too much credit for it. It's more intrinsic.
This is surveillance of the truck the thief pulled up in. A few seconds later, he gets out of the driver's seat, grabs his gas tank, and gets between two Manna Food Bank vans and starts stealing the gas, siphoning from the tank. In another angle, you see him pulling around in that truck. He's shielded from a view of drivers by a semi-trailer along Swannanoa River Road where Manna is. This is a close-up of the suspect, who was so bold he'd returned repeatedly to refill his small multi-gallon tank.
That's money that we could use to purchase food or to get food out to people. So it's just, stealing from anybody is wrong. In this case, it hurts more than just Manna Food Bank. It hurts the community.
Coming up, leaving football for a higher calling, where one quarterback could be next year. We are back in 90 seconds. Utah State quarterback Levi Williams led the Aggies to a bowl-eligible season this past weekend, and then he decided to hang it up and not return for a senior season. Instead, this hero is honoring his family who have served before him and is going to try to become a Navy SEAL. The selection process begins in February. Williams told KSL Radio yesterday, quote, "I just want to be in a spot where I can protect this great country, where we get to play football with the freedom to do that. I think this is the best country in the world. So I'd like to keep it that way and protect it as long as I can." On to the next challenge. Best of luck to Levi. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.